Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, I'm going to give you prompt 9 in the Stitch the Season 2022 online workshop. We're creating a fabric book and we're at the tail end. Only 2 prompts to go. Today's prompt uses the word light. So anything that you can think of that encompasses light, you can use in your book, whether it's a candle or a sunset, a fireplace or a Christmas light. I'll show you my sample as well as the one I'm going to do in class today to create my unique page. And then it's up to you to create yours. So let's get started. For my sample video here, I did a candle for the prompt light. I just love the way the candle looks, and I tried to make it look like it was glowing with the addition of fabric and the stitches to really emphasize that flame. And then I stitched the word faith. I just thought that was appropriate for my book. So that's the 9th prompt. Today I'm going to do something a little different. So going through all the pages that I've already done, you can still see I have the safety pins there just as my guide. I have all my pages and I have just one page left, and then the cover, which will be our final prompt. So this is going to be my page for my final prompt. For light though, I'm not going to do a candle or a flame. I'm going to do the glow from Christmas lights because that's something that I just love at Christmas time. So to that end, I have some black fabric that's going to be reminiscent of the night. And then I have some other fabrics. I'm going to stitch onto this directly. So I'm going to set my book aside for now and gather the rest of my supplies. So because I'm doing Christmas lights, I have an idea that I want to do a lot of stitches, little straight stitches, French knots, that type of thing on my Christmas lights. And I'm going to do it in the shape of a Christmas tree. But I want it to look like it's in a field of trees. So I have a little piece of this non-woven, non-fusible stabilizer. It's just a little piece of, well, it feels almost like a cross between paper and fabric. And I'm just putting this behind my fabric and I'll stitch through it, and it gives me a little more stability because I know I'm going to be poking a lot of holes. If you don't have it, you don't need to get it. You can use a second piece of fabric just as easily, just a little scrap for behind your piece. It'll just hold and give it a little more body. So I have that starting to come together. And then I have these other dark fabrics, and I wanted them to look like trees in the background with only one tree really glowing. Because these fabrics have little white dots in them, they're kind of reminiscent of Christmas lights on these trees, but I really want my main tree to be the focus. So I'm going to stitch them with all different colors of embroidery floss here. I even pulled out some metallic embroidery floss, which I'm not really crazy about using because I find it to be very finicky, but I do think it's beautiful and has its place. So if I'm brave, I'll use that as well. Now I have some little buttons here because I was thinking on top of my Christmas tree, I might want a star, and we'll see how that goes. Right now, I just want to plan my tree. I think I'm going to make it right here, not center of the page, but just slightly off center. So I'll just kind of roughly sketch that in, just so I have just the height. And I'm just going to sketch in a triangle. And I'll round the bottom. I want it to look like a tree out in the field. And then I want these fabrics to look like just trees in the field. So I'm just going to cut this gray one first. This will be in the far back of the field. I'll cut it in half so I can get 2 trees out of this. And I'll cut it a lot taller than I want because I can always trim it down. I'll just round the edges a little bit. Set that piece aside. So now I have 2 that I can add here and here. And I'll just trim this one down for a variety of sizes. Like that. And then I want to take some of this darker fabric and do the same thing. I'll maybe put a tree back here and a tree back there. So this is the part where I play and really just design things. So I'll cut this way, make that tree for the background. And maybe I'll move these back a little bit and put a tree right in the foreground here, having a little bit of overlap. And put a little tree over there. So I kind of like that. I want to just maybe move this one over slightly. Put my tree here. Now for this one, I want my tree to be in the front. So I'm just going to make a mark here so I can cut it so it looks like this tree is peeking out from behind. Now the first thing I need to do is stitch all these down. I can stitch right through that stabilizer on the back. So I'll just do some light stitching all the way around the perimeter of these trees. And then we can get started by creating that tree full of lights. So I stitched all my little background trees, the ones that aren't the dominant shapes, but they are there and they're important, and I'll put my wording up top here. I wanted to show you what it looked like on the back using that fusible interfacing, and it looks just like if there was another piece of fabric there. But it crinkles when I stitch on it, and it just gives it a little body, so it's very helpful. So now I get to start the fun part. I think of the first layer of this tree, because I'm not making a formal structure. I'm not going to stitch the stem or the bows for the tree. I'm just going to make little stitches, and I'm going to start with this little white pearl thread. And I'm just going to make little stitches all the way around the perimeter, spacing them fairly evenly spaced. And I'm just going to have them going out, and they're just little stitches. So just like this. I might have them at different directions, but I'm really just trying to carve out the shape here. And I'm leaving a good amount of space in between them because I'm going to introduce color, and that's where I'm going to get my light effect for this prompt. So I'll stitch all the way around the perimeter, and then I'll come back and fill in with the white thread. So I'm filling up, maybe a third or even slightly less than a third of my space with this white stitches here, with these white stitches here. I'm just trying to carve out the shape so that it's more dense and more densely filled in than without it. And I'm using the white, and that'll be my dominant color, but it won't really stand out because the other colors are so much brighter and more attractive, they'll look a lot better. The white, though, just brightens up this image, and it kind of acts like a background piece of fabric. So I'll continue stitching and show you how this looks and the look I'm going for when I'm done. Now once I have that perimeter created, I want to just go in and add some stitches just to fill in some of these areas, but not too many. And again, I want to keep them nice and small. So there I have my white layer all done. You can see on the back, because the front stitches are very tiny, the back stitches are very long, trying to get to each of those areas. So now that I have my basic shape started, I can really start to have fun here. I could continue to make just little dash stitches with my colors, and I'm going to start with yellow because it's one of the brightest, or I can make little French knots, and I think I'm going to make the French knots. I'll start by making 3 to 5 French knots of each color that I have here on my embroidery floss, and then I can come back and fill it in as needed. So to make the French knot, I just simply pull my thread through with my knot on the back of my thread, and now I have this nice long loop. I'm going to create a little tension between the knot and the end of the thread, but not so much that I'm tugging on the fabric, just enough so that it's taut. And I take my needle, and I'm going to go 3 times around. So I'm going to bring my needle to my loop, my little taut loop here, and wrap it around 3 times. Now I'm going to keep this tension on the end of my thread that's on my needle, and I'll go back in that same loop. With my thumb, I'm holding down on that thread to create that tension, and I'm just gently going to pull all the way through with that thread. And there I have 1 French knot. Now I could knot on the back here and start again, but I'm just going to bring my thread over to another spot here, and I'll go up a little ways. So I'm using a lot of thread to travel across this piece. And as I get up to the top of the tree, I want my knots to be smaller. So instead of wrapping them around 3 times, I'll wrap them around 2 or even 1, depending on where I am on that tree. And I'll continue with these 3 knots, and I'll do that with all my different colors. And from there, I'll see if I want to add additional colors or additional knots or even more of that white background. So here I've made 3 of the colors that I wanted, and I also made 3 white or off-white French knots to indicate lights. And I like the way it's coming, but it's clear to me that I need a whole lot more. So I'm going to add 4 more of each color and see how that looks. And if that's not full enough, I'll keep adding more and more until I get the look that I want. I think I'm going to add 7 or 8 more of these off-white color, because again, I want that white color as the basis. So then I'll come back and take a look at it and reassess it further. So I added additional French knots and it's starting to take shape the way I want it. I added a few more of these off-white ones as well, just to balance out and make the other colors really pop and appear brighter. But I really need to pull out the big guns now to really make this come to life. So I took some of this metallic thread. This is the DMC E3852, if anybody's interested in knowing exactly which color the metallic, because they come in various metallics. And I separated it. It's 6 strands, but each strand is woven together. And I just threaded 1 single strand. And as you can see, even though it's very thin, it does stand out. I want to make a series of these little straight stitches over here, these little seed stitches, but I'm just going to randomly put them throughout the tree, wherever there's not a French knot or a stitch. And this just gives a little metallic look, a little glimmer. May not show up in camera, but in person you do notice a little sparkle here. So I want to continue by doing a layer of these all around, and then I want to do a layer of a shadow layer. So I'm going to take a color very similar to my background color, and I'll show you that after I get done with this metallic thread. So that's the addition of the metallic, and it gives a really subtle effect, but it does add a little pop of brightness. So now I'm just going to take a color that really matches the background. I could even go darker, and here I have just some black pearl, and I probably will use both of them. And I'm just going to make another series of these seed stitches on the background just to cast a little bit of shadow. So I'm just going to set them down and make little stitches. And again, the key is little stitches here. If this will add a little more texture and shadow to my bright colors. And it's a nice contrast between the white and the brightness of the pinks and the yellows. So I'll add a few of these and add a few of the small stitches with the pearls and take a look and see if I'm actually happy with the way that tree has finished. So I finished stitching my tree. Feasibly, I could add more French knots and more background stitches, but with the addition of the 2 darker colors, the shadows, I think it really works, and I like the way that looks. So now all I have left to do is add the button for the top of the tree and my text, and of course, then attach it to my book page. I wanted to show you the back of the tree. It's actually kind of really pretty with all the different colors, but that's what the back looks like, and I could trim around this as well, just so that there's not so much stabilizer. So right now I've got to decide which button I want to put on. I think that's a little big. I think I want to stick with a star shape. That's kind of nice. And I'll just try the little one since I already took it out. Oh, I like that little one. So I'm going to stitch that down too. I'll stitch my text, I'll stitch the button down, and I'll add this to my page and show you the results. So I stitched down my page to my book. I used the little wording here that I liked, all is bright, stitched around it. I added a few more little stitches, not only to hold it in place, but to add a little more shadow. I really like the way this tree came out. And the last thing I did was put just a teeny little French knot on the top of each of the other trees, just to symbolize that it's the star on top of the tree. So this is my completed prompt, and I'm quite pleased with it. So that's how I created my fabric page using the prompt light. There are really so many possibilities, and I really look forward to seeing all the things that you come up with. Continue to post on Instagram using the hashtag StitchTheSeason2022, or join our Facebook group, Stitch the Season 2022. If you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for joining me today.